So what's up, people, and welcome to the chapters 22 and 23 discussion of Choujin Next. So chapters 22 and 23 came out a while back, and as always, I will leave a link to these chapters that are currently being shown on the publisher's official website, Manga Plus, for free to the North American audience. So if you're interested, go take a look at them before they pull these chapters back. So with regards to these chapters, there is a certain story writing style of Sui Ishida that I really enjoy. And chapters 22 and 23 really bring back that writing style. These chapters are signature Sui Ishida writing styles. And because of that, I really enjoy these chapters very much. And much of that has to do with the psychology and the character development with regards to the various characters that come out. If you look at many of the mangas, especially the shonen ones, as much as there may be an extensive amount of character development, much of that is governed by the plot of the story. And that doesn't mean that those stories have bad character development or shallow character development. It's just that much of that characteristic becomes governed by what the author wants to do with the plot. A good example of this is Eiichiro Oda's One Piece. Many of the characters that come out in One Piece are some of the most well thought out and well developed characters. However, as you go through these arcs, you notice that many of these characters are developed to help move that arc forward. Yes, there are characters that are complex and they will move from evil to good or vice versa. But within a certain storyline, you identify who are the antagonists. And of course, the protagonists are always the Straw Hats and their current gang of nakamas. And you understand how the characters will continue to move along to help move the plot forward with regards to the development of the oppression by the antagonists and then overcoming that by the protagonists. In the case of Sui Ishida's work, as much as the characters are there to help move the plot along, they aren't so embedded into the plot that you understand what their characters are through the typical progression of the plot. And the revelation and the development of these characters aren't brought out so obvious with regards to the requirement for bringing the plot forward. They are specific characters who just happen to be the way they are. And in many ways, it's the character that will govern how the plot will move rather than having a standard plot and then developing the characters to revolve around them. And that is something I really found in chapters 22 and 23, and that is why I enjoyed it very much. Sui Ishida introduces more about these characters not through plot or through dialogue, but through certain instances where you're really not given all that much with regards to the character unless you actually read into and understand what that certain instance means. And in this case, since chapter 21 ended where Azuma finally was able to awaken his Choujin powers, and the first thing he did was challenge Tokio to a duel. The following chapters of 22 and 23 go into a understanding of why he is the way he is. If you recall, throughout this entire story so far, we saw a certain personality in Azuma. He seemed to be this very energetic and very positive personality that contrasted the very beta-like persona of Tokio. And yet, somewhere along the way, after they took the Choujin serum, something happened to Azuma, and we never really understood what it was until about chapter 21, when we realized that he was being extremely dark based upon the fact that he could not awaken his Choujin powers. And so if his Choujin powers were awakened in chapter 21, why would he challenge Tokio to a duel? Well, chapters 22 and 23 finally go into a bit of that discussion. And what's interesting, once again, is that by showing certain scenes throughout the various chapters, you start piecing together and finally understanding what sort of person Azuma is. Azuma is a hero worshiper. He wants to be a hero. And in that sense, he is similar to Ellie. Ellie also wants to be heroic. But the difference may be exactly that. Azuma wants to be a hero, whereas Ellie wants to be heroic. And that's one thing I really love about how Sui Ishida wrote Choujin X, is the contrast and the comparison between these two characters. Ellie wants to help the society. She always wants to help the underdog. That is why she has always been by Tokio's side, oftentimes saving his life multiple times because of the fact that he was under much duress throughout the story, whether due to his psychology or due to the plot. And because of that, Ellie needed to help save Tokio, and through that, she becomes heroic. Azuma, also, if you recall in the first few chapters, wanted to help people out. But as we find out going down the road, what he wants to be is a hero, a recognized hero by the public. That is what he thrives on, is the ability to help people so that they will be admiring of his capabilities and persona. If he doesn't get that, his persona gets injured. If you want to call it ego, that'll be fine. If you want to call it arrogance, that is fine as well. But there is a side of him that demands from the public a recognition of his heroic deeds, whereas Ellie never ever cares what the public thinks. She just does it because she feels someone is in need of her help. And once again, I am glad Sui Ishida brought out both these characters to compare, although he never really brings them outright to show how these two compare. They're just written kind of as is, and it's up to the reader to recognize the differences between such characters. Which, once again, I really like because it's much more natural. It doesn't feel forced. And it lets the story progress with the characters naturally going in the direction that their personas steer them. And what was interesting about chapters 22 and 23 is we learn another twist in the story. It's not really a plot twist. It's actually a character twist. Why does Azuma want to duel Tokio so much? And we find out through one small backstory that comes out in these chapters. And it's a very simple story. Azuma was challenging many kids at school in arm wrestling contests, and he kept on winning. And finally, after everybody was challenged and lost, Azuma looks to Tokio and says, "Why don't you try it as well?" And of course, Tokio, being the self-conscious person, tries to get away, but Azuma tells him he should to somehow gain confidence. Well, from the story, he has an arm wrestling contest with Azuma, Tokio does, and he loses, as you expect him to, and the story ends. So what is the character development that comes out in that? Well, if you look at the one scene in the story, you realize that Azuma, after winning, finds his arm to be either extremely tired or in pain due to the strong grip from Tokio. In whatever case, the outcome did not come out as Azuma expected. Tokio is a beta character who Azuma always has to protect, a weak character. And so from this arm wrestling contest, what he expected was that Tokio would try hard and Azuma will easily win. But what he finds out in this arm wrestling contest is he barely beat Tokio. And his arm seemed to be extremely tired after that, and yet Tokio seemed to be fine. And so Azuma won, but only he understood the difference in capability between these two characters. And if it was just that one incident, it wouldn't have mattered. But when you combine it with what was happening recently, where Tokio received his Choujin powers before Azuma, and Azuma could not bring them out, it made him feel extremely inferior, and those types of memories came up to haunt him. So when Azuma finally received his Choujin powers after being destroyed by Ririka, he had to do two things. One, he needed to destroy Ririka, which he did. But second, he had to show that once he became a Choujin, he was far more powerful than Tokio. This would somehow negate all of that negative feeling he had when he could not change to a Choujin compared to Tokio. Now this is interesting because, of course, through the narration that we had in the previous chapters, a lot of times Choujin powers come out due to a personality fault. If you are completely confident and satisfied with yourself, there is no desire in who you are, and because of that, a Choujin power does not come out. And so if Azuma did not receive a Choujin power, whereas Tokio did, much of that would have indicated that it was because Azuma was of sound confidence and he was satisfied with himself, whereas Tokio was not. But that is not how Azuma took it. He took it as an inferiority when he did not receive his Choujin powers. And so he had to fight Tokio, which is what all of 22 and 23 is about. There is a tremendous amount of action going on between Azuma and Tokio. And in the beginning, Tokio can't even figure out why Azuma is fighting him. Before he can even acknowledge whether he wanted to take on that duel, Azuma was already attacking him. And if that was all that there was to it, I think Tokio would have just gave up and told Azuma he would have won. But during that fight, where Azuma was destroying Tokio, he also went out of his way to endanger many of the people around him. And that lack of care of all these other individuals just so that he could achieve superiority once again showed the difference between somebody like Ellie versus somebody like Azuma. And in Tokio's opinion, he could not leave that alone, and so he turned into the bird Choujin. Now, this is Tokio that we're talking about, so as much as he is a Choujin, his beta personality still keeps him from bringing out a tremendous amount of aggression. So while he is a Choujin, he still gets destroyed by Azuma. And the only thing that keeps him somewhat alive is the Choujin's ability to recover. And he keeps on recovering, and Azuma keeps on almost fatally wounding him over and over again, to the point where Tokio finally reaches a limit and he can no longer revive himself anymore, and Azuma strikes the fatal blow. Or so he thinks. Because this is Tokio, the bird Choujin that's a target by some evil demonic Choujin that distributed the serum in the first place. We don't know why yet, but there is some motive, and it seems to revolve around Tokio. They were looking for a certain personality that will get awakened by the Choujin serum, and when he turned into a bird Choujin, they realized that he was somewhat the chosen one. So what makes him so special? Well, we find out in chapter 23 when Azuma, after striking the fatal blow, observes the true awakened Choujin form of Tokio. And after that, it is no contest. Tokio destroys Azuma. He just literally wipes the floor with him. And as much as Azuma tries and brings out all of the capabilities that he has, it's not even a contest anymore. And it is at this time that finally Azuma understands. All this time, Tokio, through his personality, not his capability, admired Azuma for who he is. The never surrender persona of extreme positivity that always helped people. He admired the heroic efforts that Azuma did. And that is what Azuma realizes was missing the moment Tokio became a Choujin. And his actions seem to stem from gaining that admiration back. But what he realizes now is the level of Choujin power between him and Tokio are completely different. And as much as Tokio admired Azuma and his heroic deeds in the past, that admiration is gone now. And we see Tokio finally saving Azuma from drowning after he was thrown into the river. And the chapters end with Azuma realizing that character who admired him no longer exists. This isn't about, again, meeting the objective of the protagonist, somehow saving the day and going forward. This is about two personas clashing based upon the situations that happened in the story. And I do not know how Azuma will turn out. There is a good possibility Azuma may end up becoming a major antagonist in this entire story. But Sui Ishida really doesn't give you always these answers. It's not obvious based upon the plot how the characters will move, which is, again, one thing I love about his work. And so we'll have to find out through future chapters what will happen to Azuma now that he has realized his defeat. Now, aside from that, there was one interesting historical information that came out in these chapters, which was that 70 years ago, there seemed to have been a great war between the humans and the Choujins. And a certain area called the Great Galeta or something like that, where the Choujins lived, declared war on humanity. I don't know what happened during that time, but it seemed to indicate that much of what happened then may be tied into what is going on now. And we'll probably learn more about it as we go further into the chapters. But I really, really enjoyed these chapters, not just for the action, but for the character revelation of these two characters. It is what makes me really enjoy Sui Ishida's work, similar to how I enjoy Kentaro Miura's work, such as Berserk, or Yukito Kishiro's work, such as Battle Angel Alita. These story writers tend to write stories in a very interesting way where the characters somehow show their personas not through the development of the story, but through their own personality eventually affecting the story that come out. And so it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I am looking forward to seeing what happens in chapters 24 and 25. And when they come out, I'll bring out another video, and I hope you join me at that time. But I would like to ask how you felt about these two characters from these two chapters. How do you feel the story will move along? What will happen to the relationship between Azuma and Tokio? Do you feel that Azuma has succumbed to understanding that he was defeated and will move positively, or will he dwell upon his defeat and turn into an even darker persona? Any comments you have will be much appreciated. And in any case, thank you very much for listening to the video. And until the next one, happy manga reading. And as always, Jaya, nice day, everyone.